In the spring of 1945, as World War II reached its final and most violent chapter in Europe, the Battle of Berlin began as the ultimate confrontation between a collapsing Nazi Germany and the advancing Soviet Red Army, a battle that was never just about capturing a city but about crushing an ideology that had plunged the world into 6 years of unimaginable bloodshed, because Berlin was the political, psychological, and symbolic heart of Adolf Hitler's Third Reich, and its fall would mean the absolute end of Nazi power. By this time Germany was already on its knees, its armies destroyed on multiple fronts, its cities reduced to rubble by relentless Allied bombing, and its people exhausted, starving, and fearful. Yet Hitler still refused to surrender, believing until the very end that some miracle would save him, while in the East the Soviet Union prepared for one final, overwhelming strike to end the war. On April 16, 1945, the Battle of Berlin officially began when the Red Army launched a massive assault from the Oder River toward the German capital, unleashing one of the largest artillery bombardments in history, with thousands of guns firing simultaneously and lighting up the night sky so brightly that soldiers later said it felt like daylight had arrived before sunrise, as waves of Soviet infantry and tanks moved forward with a single objective: to take Berlin at any cost. The first major obstacle standing in their way was the Seelow Heights, a heavily fortified defensive position east of the city where German forces, under strict orders from Hitler, prepared for a last stand, knowing that if this line fell, Berlin would be exposed, and for several days the fighting there was brutal and desperate, with German soldiers using the high ground to inflict heavy casualties on the advancing Soviets, turning the battlefield into a slaughterhouse of fire, mud, and blood. But despite fierce resistance, Germany no longer had the manpower, fuel, or resources to stop the Soviet advance, and by April 19 the Seelow Heights were finally breached, opening the road directly to Berlin and sealing the city's fate. As Soviet armies surged forward, Berlin was surrounded by April 25, completely cut off from the rest of Germany, trapping millions of civilians along with the remaining German defenders inside a city that was already burning and broken, while inside Berlin, chaos and terror ruled daily life, as families hid in basements, subway tunnels, and ruined buildings, listening to the constant thunder of artillery and the sound of approaching tanks, with food and water becoming scarce and fear spreading faster than fire. Deep beneath the city, Adolf Hitler remained inside his underground bunker, isolated from reality and surrounded by a shrinking circle of loyal followers, issuing impossible orders to imaginary armies and refusing to accept that the war was lost, even as Soviet troops fought their way closer street by street. While in a final act of desperation, the Nazi regime sent teenage boys from the Hitler Youth and elderly men from the Volksturm into combat, arming them with outdated weapons and sending them to face experienced Soviet soldiers and tanks, a tragic and horrifying example of how completely Germany had been consumed by Hitler's obsession with total war. The fighting within Berlin itself became some of the most savage urban warfare ever recorded, as every block, every building, and even every staircase turned into a deadly battleground, with German snipers firing from ruins, Soviet tanks blasting holes through walls at point-blank range, hand-to-hand combat breaking out in dark corridors, and civilians caught helplessly in the middle, often killed by stray bullets, collapsing buildings, or artillery fire, making survival a matter of luck rather than choice. As the Red Army advanced deeper into the city, the psychological collapse of the Nazi leadership became inevitable, and on April 30, 1945, with Soviet troops only a short distance from his bunker, Adolf Hitler finally acknowledged the end in his own twisted way by committing suicide, an act that symbolized not only the death of a man but the complete collapse of the Nazi regime and the ideology that had brought destruction to much of the world. After Hitler's death, command of the city fell apart, yet fighting continued for several more days as die-hard Nazi units refused to surrender, clinging to fanatic loyalty or fear of punishment, even though the outcome was beyond doubt, until finally on May 2, 1945, German forces in Berlin officially surrendered to the Soviets, bringing the Battle of Berlin to an end and effectively ending World War II in Europe. The human cost of the battle was staggering beyond comprehension, with more than 80,000 Soviet soldiers killed, tens of thousands of German soldiers dead, and countless civilians who lost their lives amid the ruins, leaving Berlin a shattered wasteland of destroyed buildings, broken streets, and silent neighborhoods that once represented the pride of Germany. One of the most powerful and enduring images of the war followed shortly after, when Soviet soldiers raised their red flag over the Reichstag building, a moment that sent a clear and undeniable message to the world that Nazi Germany had been defeated forever. Yet the Battle of Berlin was not just the end of a war, it was the beginning of a new and uncertain global order. As Germany was divided into East and West, Berlin itself became a symbol of Cold War tension, and former allies soon turned into rivals, reshaping global politics for decades to come. While the ruins of the city stood as a haunting reminder of the consequences of hatred, dictatorship, and unchecked ambition, making the Battle of Berlin not only the final battle of World War II in Europe, but one of history's most powerful warnings about the true cost of total war and the destruction it leaves behind for generations.